Confessions of a Transformed Heart by Nancy Shepard. Published in 2010 and read by the author. Chapter 2. Liberia, Here We Come. On April 14, 1986, at 29 and 26 years of age, Mark and I stepped out of the air-conditioned comfort of KLM's Boeing 747 into Liberia's tropical heat. We were in Africa at last. Below us, the tarmac steamed in the early evening light. Mark held John Mark, age 3, by the hand while I carried Melody, age 1. Another baby was expected in July. As the van sped from the airport, I stared out the opened windows. Every imaginable shade of green produced a verdant beauty for which nothing in my Midwestern background prepared me. Palm trees pointed to the stars as dusk turned to darkness. Approaching the city, I breathed in the humid, spicy air. Our driver wove through incredibly noisy traffic as thousands of pedestrians darted in all directions. At the mission's guest compound, new missionary friends hugged Mark and me warmly. Brown-skinned Liberians grabbed our hands and shook them in the traditional manner, a snap produced with the thumbs and middle fingers as the two hands separate. "Thank you for coming," they exuded. They had prayed for us. They had waited for us. They were so excited about the prospect of this new radio station. The next day began the baptism into Liberian English. "Howdy body" sounded shockingly intimate, but I soon realized it was standard. Fine O, mastering the Liberian O was important. If sick or having an especially difficult day, tryin' or tryin' small was the correct response. There was the repeated word for emphasis, small small, very small, and big big, very big. And while I was pathetically inept at making sense of the English that lay under the thick Liberian accent, at least it wasn't Swahili. After 6 weeks in Monrovia, missionary Chick Watkins flew us in the mission's 6-passenger Cessna to Tapita. In the back seat with John Mark and Melody, my heart filled with awe. We passed winding rivers beside mountains rich in iron ore. Gigantic trees in the lush rainforest looked like broccoli stalks from my aerial view. These jungles were home to rare chimpanzees, dwarf elephants, forest buffalo, duikers, leopards, pygmy hippos, ibis, eagles, hornbills, hawks, and hundreds more unique and exotic animals. Tapita was a small interior town of several thousand people, the mission station property located at its edge atop a large hill. Our mud brick house stood serenely on a beautiful green yard, surrounded by 14 mango trees. Cashews with their little apples, pink grapefruits, and green-yellow oranges hung from trees lining the yard. A flock of African gray parrots passed overhead each evening, squawking noisily. With the birth of Nathan on July 19th, we were a family of 5 living an amazing adventure in Africa. It was exciting for us rookies to work together with the 9 veteran missionaries already living in Tapita. The commonality of our goals and close proximity of our houses pushed us together emotionally and physically. Although we admired each one, Chick Watkins' obvious love of God and the Liberian people, as well as his infectious enthusiasm and boundless vision for the future, set him apart. We admired Chick and Joan for raising 6 godly children and for their more than 25 years of missionary service in Liberia. We wanted to be just like them. Our missionary team was busy in a number of important ministries. Many days I heard one of the airplanes rev up and then rumble down the grassy airstrip. In the evening it returned, completing yet another successful evangelistic or humanitarian flight. The mission property hummed with busy Bible school students. With 3 levels of education available, there was something for everyone, from those who had never been to school before to those who were high school graduates. The sick made their way to the mission's clinic for the quality care it offered at a bargain price. Tuesday's Belly Day brought in dozens of ladies for prenatal checkups, their bulging tummies wrapped in bright African lapa cloth. Mark loved the challenge of setting up a radio station in the middle of the jungle. The project was huge and very physical. He and every willing man kept busy as power lines were constructed, the tower site cleared, the tower erected, and the electronic equipment installed. Mark was so in his element he actually bemoaned the day the project would be completed and the radio station on the air. He was having fun. Because we lived on the same property as the Bible school and clinic, everything was within easy walking distance. This made it possible for me to be involved in several ministries even though I had 3 small children. I shared the gospel with clinic patients recovering from childbirth. I cared for visitors coming to help with the radio station and took my turn as mission station hostess. Besides helping other missionary wives by sharing in the teaching of their children, I also taught Bible studies, English, and home economics to Liberians of a variety of ages and educational levels. Each Wednesday I walked down the deeply rutted roads into market to enjoy the best flea market ever. The goods, dried and fresh meats, mountains of rice, canned tomato paste, bouillon cubes, pots, plastic dishes, soap, African cloth, and a delightful assortment of garden produce, were displayed on rickety tables. On the ground, mounds of wrinkled used clothing from the U.S. were heaped on clear sheets of plastic. The market bustled with buyers and sellers. Noisy, enthusiastic shoppers greeted friends and tended to squalling children. Voices ricocheting across the outdoor market created a noisy sense of community I found enchanting. Our social life was interesting and varied. Picturesque outdoor feasts with the Bible school students and their families boasted rugged wooden tables weighed down with huge pots of steaming rice and smaller pots of Liberian soup. The chop suey-like mixture of meat, vegetables, oil, and bouillon cubes was quite delicious, though strange-looking to our American eyes. The missionary team worked hard, but we also played hard. Skits, songs, rook tournaments, a Valentine's Day party. Mark and I acted out a ridiculous harlequin romance I wrote for the occasion. And Christmas dinner together in a screened-in pavilion created wonderfully fun breaks from the hard but fulfilling work. Never a country girl, I was intrigued by the simple pleasure of eating a grapefruit plucked from a tree in our own yard, or a pineapple I had watched grow and then ripen to succulent sweetness. It was fascinating to watch chicks grow from hatchlings to gangly adolescents to crowing table-ready adult roosters. Mark was given several hens and roosters as gifts from grateful church members, and they became temporary and welcome, albeit noisy and smelly, members of the family. We gave them silly names: Miss Marple, Agatha Christie, and Lucky, to name a few. Lucky was not actually his original name, but rather an earned title. After multiple failed attempts to kill him and cook him up for dinner, no other name would do. Our small children thrived in their outdoor, summer all-year-round life. Exotic pets weren't exotic to them. Our mongoose, Rikki Tikki Tavi, named after the mongoose made famous by Rudyard Kipling in The Jungle Book, ran to baby Nathan, who was sitting on the tiled floor. Over and over, Nathan picked him up and tossed him. Rikki came back for more. Nathan laughed, thoroughly delighted. Annie, the Watkins baby chimp, came by to visit from time to time, making great photo ops as she grabbed Melody's hand and walked beside her. John Mark roamed the edge of the jungle outside our house, slingshot in hand, hunting for lizards. At night, the children fell asleep to a symphony of insects, distant tree bear calls, and the rustle of jungle leaves. It was thrilling to get to know a totally different culture than the one in which I had grown up. While I enjoyed people watching in general, the women especially fascinated me. I could easily see we shared a number of commonalities, but I couldn't help notice the many differences between us as well. My blonde hair and fair skin contrasted sharply to my Liberian counterparts' black cornrows and rich chocolate brown skin. My physical weakness contrasted with the almost brute strength I observed. I watched ladies balance heavy loads on their heads, sometimes while toting babies on their backs. Lacking any of the modern conveniences that I had grown up taking for granted, these women hand-washed clothes in creeks, rivers, or lagoons, or with water drawn from an open well. Rather than shopping for food at a grocery store, the women cooked and ate the food they had grown in their gardens and slash-and-burn-style farms. And, most glaringly, I had enjoyed educational opportunities of which they dared not even dream. Each January, our Interior Mission Station hosted a seminar for the women of the Mono and Gio tribes. The 2 weeks were filled with singing, teaching, and preaching. My first year in Liberia, as I taught principles for Christian living in the home to the large group, I was extremely conscious of how different my life was from the lives of those who sat before me. I felt so young, so rich, and so white. I wanted the cultural barriers to fall down and for them to know and understand me. I wanted to know and understand them as well. For months I had been hearing about the seminar's amazing party night, and I wondered if this would be my chance to connect with the women on a more personal level. Upon arrival at the much-acclaimed event, Kool-Aid and cookies in hand, I watched dust rise to the ceiling in cloudy puffs of brown as the ladies played a game they called Snake. Setting down the refreshments, I jumped in, sure it must be easier than it looked. It wasn't. In fact, it was much harder than it looked. After a few minutes, I sat down, completely overwhelmed. There followed an exhausting series of games, all involving complicated foot movements, often in unison. I was amazed at the strength and coordination of even the oldest women. How did they know when to jump and which foot to use? I couldn't even begin to figure out the intricacies of the games they played so effortlessly. I left the party feeling every bit the newbie and not particularly enjoying it. In the year following that first seminar, Liberia became my home in a way I never dreamed possible. I found it exciting and perhaps even a bit heady to be living a life that was so unique. I loved my quaint mud brick house in its park-like yard. I loved the warm tropical weather. I had several missionary friends to whom I felt particularly close, and I was connecting more and more with the Liberian women. As my second seminar approached, I was excited. I was not nearly as nervous about the seminar as I had been the year before, and was confident that the material I had prepared would challenge the ladies and be quite fun for me to teach as well. And although intimidated by even the thought of playing the games I had for the most part only watched, I determined that this year I would participate in every one. By the time I arrived with my refreshments in hand for Thursday's party night, the atmosphere was already electric. Brown eyes sparkled with excitement when the first game was introduced. Sandaled feet began stomping, strong hands began clapping. I stepped into the circle of laughing women, knowing I needed to get in there quickly or I would lose my nerve. Dark hands grabbed me from each direction. I looked down at their fast-moving feet and jumped, attempting to copy what I was seeing. No success. I tried again. Hilarious laughter followed each move I made. The worse I played the game, the harder they laughed. I looked into their eyes. They were not laughing at me. They were laughing with me. It was obvious to them that now I was the student and they the teachers, and they loved it. The party was a success for everyone. I was predictably terrible at every game. Each failure brought the laughter reserved for friends who are known and loved, the laughter of acceptance and camaraderie. In 1989, we returned to the U.S., tanned and joyful with our 3 beautiful children for our one-year home assignment. We were young, vital, and involved in something important. Our first 3-year term in missionary service had been everything we dared hope, plus some. I loved God and was surrendered to His will. I was, after all, a missionary to Africa. I knew my life would be wonderful. It already was wonderful. Everything was exactly as it should be.